Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So it's time for another weekly update and I have 6 books to talk to you about today. And before we get started, leave a spaceship emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. So like always, we'll work our way from the lowest to the highest rated. The first book I'll talk about today is a 2-star book, and that's The Dead in the Dark by Courtney Gould. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out August 3rd. So this is a YA horror book, and in Snakebite, Oregon, teens are mysteriously disappearing and turning up dead, and just generally something seems off about this town. So the Ortiz Woodleys, who are ghost hunters, are blamed after they arrive at this town and, these mysterious things start happening. So Ashley, the girlfriend of the first missing teen, feels his presence around and ends up teaming up with Logan, who is the daughter of these ghost hunters, to investigate. So I'm honestly really disappointed that I didn't like this more. I really thought I would because there are a lot of cool elements that are really appealing to me. I think these elements just didn't quite come together for me. So there are some content warnings that I want to mention up front, and they are actually listed at the beginning of the book. So there is a lot of homophobia in this really small conservative town, and basically there's a lot of people thinking that being around gay people can turn you gay. So just keep that in mind. I think this book suffered from a serious lack of suspense. Even though, we have these kids dying and strange things are happening, I just felt really removed from the situation. We also have some sections following the point of view of this supernatural dark. And I think that this really took away a lot of the mystery. The first chapter is from the perspective of the dark, and so I just felt like this kind of threw me in, and I was already aware of what was going on. We do also have a lot of time skips here, so it's hard to tell just how much time this actually takes place over. There are a lot of these time skips after some big events, and so we don't really get to see the fallout of these, which I kind of missed. The fight against this big bad just kind of fizzled out for me, unfortunately. These underlying mysteries and I think the reasons behind these events are somewhat interesting, but I definitely guessed the reasons. And I just generally struggle to get through the book, but I did like the ending overall. I think it's mostly a dark story, but I think there are some threads of hope and optimism, so I did like that. This small town setting, we have people who really don't like outsiders or gay people, and so it's kind of tough to read about this. Basically, everybody in this town are extremely rude and hateful. I did like these ghost hunting elements that we get and the technology that they use to hunt ghosts. In terms of character development, I was pretty disappointed. Logan, this daughter, we mostly follow her, and she's kind of cynical and bitter, which is somewhat understandable. She does feel extremely lonely. I did like her teaming up with Ashley, and I do think Ashley actually had the most development out of everybody, because I think she is able to have some introspection about herself, but I did also feel like this was kind of abrupt. I can buy the attraction that they feel for each other, but I don't believe in the relationship, and I think some of the things that end up happening are just not believable for me. They really don't know each other well, and so it's are they actually compatible? Sure, I can believe that they're attracted to each other, but something more, that's a little iffy for me. Logan's 2 dads were alright. Alejo seems nicer. Brandon is pretty aloof. I did get extremely annoyed with them though, because they're constantly withholding information from Logan, and it's especially after her investigation involves her in things where it would make sense to talk about this stuff, they just don't. And so that just got on my nerves. It's she's 17, why are you treating her like a child? Just talk to her, because she is getting involved in these things that you were directly withholding this information about. So I got super annoyed about that, honestly. So we do have some LGBTQ plus representation, and that was nice to see, but again, I don't know. Overall, I was just extremely disappointed in this book. I also don't think it has much rereadability potential, because once you know what's going on, that's kind of it. I've talked about how I didn't feel like there was that much suspense in this going into it, so rereading it again, I think that would even drop the suspense level further. So unfortunately for me, this didn't really work out, but I do see a lot of people on Goodreads who really loved it, so if it's something that you're still interested in, I would suggest looking at other reviews to see if this might work for you. So now we'll get into some 3-star books, and the first book I'll talk about here is Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, and so this is the first installment of the Star Wars High Republic series. Basically, we're in the early years of the Republic, where Jedi are kind of in their heyday. So we have this disaster in hyperspace that endangers the system, and the Jedi are racing to save everyone and discover a threat. So this was an interesting new setting, and I did like seeing the Jedi at the height of their power. You know, things like hyperspace and Bacta are either very new or in the process of being developed. It was interesting to see a time before these things were commonly accepted or used. With the movies and the other books, these are pretty familiar concepts, so it was like really intriguing to like have them developing these things. Learning more about hyperspace was pretty cool, but I'm still not entirely clear on how it works. It does feel like a thriller. I think there are a lot of cliffhanger endings at the end of each chapter. Early on, there's just like a lot of stuff being destroyed. I think we spent more time with these emergences than I necessarily anticipated based on the synopsis. And it's just generally pretty chaotic. And I kind of did just struggle in places to just stay interested. We have a huge cast of characters, so I really don't think I got the chance to connect with anyone or get to know anyone all that well. So like I couldn't even tell you some of the Jedi's names at this point. Like they're just all kind of bland Jedi that blend together. I definitely got confused with who everyone was. So I will say the main bad guy is at least more memorable and seems pretty interesting at least. It seems like he's not quite who he says he is and is definitely like the most intelligent member of this group and is kind of like operating on a whole nother level. I think a lot of the bad guys just seem like marauders in general who are only out for themselves, and they just don't generally think things through. I wish I had liked this a little bit more, but I am still interested in seeing what the other books in the High Republic are like. Maybe it's just this particular book didn't work for me, so yeah, this was a bit of a mixed bag. Not my favorite Star Wars book, but still enjoyable enough. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is Nyxia by Scott Reintgen. So I read this as one of the books for the special project that I'm doing where Kat from Brisbane Reviews picks my TBR. So I did an entire blog covering this, and so I'll leave that link down below so you can check it out if you haven't already. There's some fun nature and animal content. Anyway, this is a YA sci-fi book, and we have Emmett, who is one of 10 recruits who is competing for this position that is going down to this new planet Eden to essentially mine this valuable substance called Nyxia. And so he's doing this in exchange for money to take care of his family. However, the corporation behind this has some secrets. So I really liked this premise with these competition elements. Competition type things are a trope that works really well for me. Only 8 of our 10 kids can actually land on this planet. And so they have challenges with things like, quizzes about the planet and like manipulating Nyxia, this element. I liked the structure, though I did at times forget that this was in space, like they are traveling to Eden. I think the pacing was okay. Some sections were just not quite as interesting to me. There are, I think, several repetitive moments. However, there are some surprising and sad moments as well that were a bit unexpected, so I liked that he went there with it because it feels, like the stakes are really real, and it is very motivating for these kids to actually, like, take part in this journey. There are some really cool ideas here. Like, I think in the vlog I had mentioned there's, like, these treadmill simulations that just have some really interesting ideas. You can definitely get the sense that this corporation isn't entirely good, and they're definitely hiding something. I'm like very curious to find out more about them. We do have a lot of diversity with characters of color. Most of our competitors, I guess, come from lower income classes, which makes sense because of this, monetary incentive. I really liked Emmett's relationship with his family. He wants to support them, and that's like his whole reason behind going. And they're actually like really supportive of him as well, so that was really great to see. I enjoyed following him overall. He certainly will do whatever it takes to get down to Eden. We do have some nice friendships that develop, and it's interesting to see people's assumptions get challenged as you actually get to know people more and like move past how you initially perceive them. I really liked Kaya and Bilal. They both seem really nice and supportive. Kaya is very intelligent and she's a good leader. I really liked the different variety of skills that our characters have at this Nyxia manipulation. There is a bit of insta-love with some of the side characters, but I don't think romance is really as much the focus here. Overall, I did have a good time with this, and it's a series that I think I would be interested in continuing with. Was it perfect? No, but it was a fun time. So now we'll talk about a couple of 4-star books, and the first one I'll talk about is The Carnelian Fox by MacLeod. So this is another one that I read for this project. And this is essentially like, I guess it's called Gamelit, but it's essentially asking the question, what if Pokemon were real? So our main character, Sam, kind of grew up with nothing, and she sets her sights on, battling in the arenas with these gyms. I can't remember what that stands for. It's like genetically enhanced monsters, maybe? So we follow her as she builds her team and encounters others who want to end this game or just generally have different views of these gyms. So this was super fun. Again, this premise is basically Pokemon, but it actually does do some surprising things with this story. I really love this idea of these gems. You know, it starts off as just a game, and then I think it really builds into something much more. And reading it, having played a lot of Pokemon games, I definitely had this like nice sense of nostalgia and comfort with this type of adventure. Like, there's a lot of familiar aspects to it, so it's just like really fun to read this. I think it's really cool to see how, you know, this idea of these monsters, like how would they integrate into society? And like you kind of see this in the Pokemon games where, you know, like Pokemon are used to do different jobs and stuff, and like you come to rely on them. So it's just really interesting to get to explore that idea in a book. We still do have some people who are conflicted about this. You know, some people believe that these gems just shouldn't exist at all. Some treat them as objects instead of partners. So we do get to see a wide variety of attitudes. It's pretty fast-paced overall, and we do have some exciting battles and challenges, but I will say I think the ending is a little bit rushed. Each chapter also ends with some foreshadowing, which I didn't love. I don't think that this is really something that works well for me in general, so I didn't really like it here, and I think that was one of the big reasons why it wasn't a full 5-star book for me. However, you know, this book did cause me to feel some feels though, so that was nice. Our main character, Sam, is mostly enjoyable, but I think she can be sometimes hot-headed and judgmental, and she doesn't always think things through. She does want to fight to help her family and, like, you know, her sister in particular, so I found her reasons behind, you know, her career path, I guess, to be pretty motivating. She does come from this less well-off family, and so she's been bullied for this before, and I, like, do really enjoy how she doesn't want her sister to have to go through the same things that she went through. Of course, I loved her bond with her gems. They are truly partners, and it was just so great to see her build her team. I really loved Finn and Rika in particular, so that's like, you know, a fox and a red panda. They were so wonderful. We also have another character, Lucy, who does show gems, and so I think this was an interesting alternative to battle. You know, it's just like showing them off as like a dog show or something like that, but, you know, with a variety of monsters. So that was just really cool to see. We do meet some other interesting characters along the way. Of course, we have some gym leaders that we encounter. Some of them, I think, impart some wisdom, but not all of them. In terms of the gems, I really liked the different types and creatures that we get here. The evolutions and powers are really fun, and it's just entertaining to think about how you would actually, like, battle and capture things in real life. So, you know, like, I will say I did sometimes confuse some of the gems and the typing that we get to see here, but overall, this was a really fun book, and if you enjoy Pokemon, like, I would highly suggest picking this up. I definitely want to continue this series. The other 4-star book I'll talk about today is Neon Gods by Katee Roberts. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out June 1st. So this is essentially an adult retelling of Hades and Persephone. So Persephone flees after her mother and Zeus announced their engagement because she wants no part of this. Zeus is not a nice man. So Persephone ends up fleeing to the lower city where she makes a bargain with Hades to protect her in exchange for revenge against Zeus. So I had a really great time with this retelling. It's set in Olympus, which seems to be somewhere in the US, I think, because Persephone mentions wanting to pursue a PhD at Berkeley. So that being said, like, I was not very clear on the world building and whether or not these 13 gods actually have powers. Like, I am not clear on if there's supernatural elements. It seems like there are, you know, especially with Hermes in particular, it seems like she had some supernatural skills, but again, it's not really well explained. I don't think there's that much to the plot overall. You know, again, Persephone essentially doesn't want to marry Zeus because he's rumored to be this modern-day Bluebeard. So again, she makes this deal. So I really like seeing Persephone and Hades fall for each other and just generally get to know each other more. They do fall pretty quickly, but I actually really believed in this chemistry, so I was okay with it. It's definitely this grump and sunshine dynamic. I liked getting to see Hades' personality. You know, beyond his grumpy exterior, I think he's very much this protective alpha type, and he literally carries Persephone around sometimes. I think he's very sweet though, and, you know, he's very careful about consent, which was nice. You know, he's very careful not to push Persephone beyond her comfort levels, and there's a lot of really great discussions about consent in general. Persephone is really funny, she's sweet, and definitely has her own mind. She's good at taking Hades' feelings into account too, which is just like so sweet based on, you know, his background. I think she makes sure that he's comfortable with developments and doesn't try to pull any sneaky things. Like, there's a discussion that they have about birth control, which was really great, and just, you know, safe sex and getting STD testing and everything like that. I liked seeing them get to know each other beyond just their masks that they wear in public. I think they truly understand each other and can be themselves, and they have some really excellent banter. So there are several sex scenes, and these are very explicit. There are some elements of BDSM and just generally like sex in public places. It is very sex positive, and, you know, like, it makes it feel very normal to use safe sex practices. We do have some LGBTQ plus representation. For instance, Persephone is bi, and I think Dionysus may be asexual. It's not confirmed, but that's what it kind of seemed like. There are some really fun nods to mythology, like Pomegranate and Cerberus. Again, with this world building, I did have some confusion about how it works. Like, our 13 are like the big gods. So these are actually titles, and some of them are like inherited, but some of them are like elected positions. And it wasn't clear to me how this all worked, which titles were legacy positions. And I also just like kept wondering, like, okay, so for instance, like with Hades, he has inherited this position. Was his name Hades before he inherited this position, or like did he have another name before becoming Hades? So it was like things like that that just kind of were in the back of my mind that detracted a little bit from my enjoyment. And there's also like something that happens later in the book with some questionable math. I figured out I was forgetting one of the 13, but I was like, I think either something is wrong and I'm just like forgetting another person, but it was talking about like the majority of these people being on one side, and I was like, I think that's about half, not the majority. So, and like, it was just little things like that that kind of bothered me. But, you know, I think those are pretty minor things, and generally I think this was a really fun book. There are some content warnings for things like, you know, forced marriage. I think there's some violence against women as well. But yeah, I had a really good time with this overall, and I definitely want to continue the series. I do hope that the next book would give us a little bit more development in terms of the world building, but I think, you know, if you're looking for an adult retelling of Hades and Persephone, this is definitely worth checking out. The last book I'll talk about today is a 4.5-star book, and that's Hold Back the Tide by Melinda Salisbury. So Kat and I actually buddy read this, and of course, you know, it was featured, I guess, in that vlog that I did. So this is a YA horror book, and we follow Alva, who is just trying to survive. And she's just trying to, you know, fly under the radar because she's forced to live with her father, who murdered her mother years ago. Their family is tasked with monitoring the water levels in the loch, and something is out there. So I really enjoyed this. I think the pacing was great. It's really easy to get into this story, and I found the writing to be humorous at times and just generally witty and very enjoyable. I did guess some things, but I think the story ultimately went in a direction I didn't expect. The ending in particular was a bit shocking, and it made me feel some feels. It does feel like a really unique story, especially for YA, and I just really appreciate this. I couldn't quite tell the time period. Like, it does feel somewhat historical, but I did really like the setting at the loch. You know, I think we have things like the paper mill and some of the guns mentioned that make me think Kat and I were trying to figure this out. Maybe it's in the 1800s, we're not entirely sure. So it's a really interesting mystery of what's out there, and I really liked learning about the different, you know, creatures that we see. There are some, I think, nice creepy moments, especially in some of the caves. There is both supernatural and human creepiness, and I think it was a really interesting juxtaposition, and I would almost argue that the human creepiness factor is almost more sinister. Alva and her father are kind of isolated and shunned from the rest of the village because they think, you know, he did something to Alva's mother. I felt bad for Alva in particular because of this. You know, I think villagers are often pretty mean or not willing to stand up for her. I really liked Alva, though. I think she's very spunky, strong-willed, and intelligent. She does want to do what's best for herself, but I think she also has a sense of honor and duty. I am a little bit more mixed on her friend Ren, though. I kind of felt at times like there was something sinister to him, but I think he is ultimately a good friend to her for the most part. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think of the 3 books that I've read, obviously so far, I guess for this vlog, this was my favorite. I'm curious to see how it compares to the other 3 books that I'll be reading that Kat chose for me. But we both had a really great time with this, and I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a great YA horror book. So that'll do it for all the books that I have finished since last time, and I'm currently reading The Soulmate Equation by Christina because I was just kind of in the mood for like a fluffy romance. This is really fun so far. It's, you know, I'm not super far into it, but I'm definitely enjoying it. I think they have a really great writing style that works really well for me. In terms of what I'm going to read next, I think I might finish up this project that I'm doing where, you know, again, Kat chooses the books that I read, so, you know, I've got 3 more of those to do. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, do you enjoy competitions in your books? So I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link is in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.